I'll never forget when my second son, Josh, was diagnosed with diabetes. That was a really hard time for us. Specifically for me, I am a very spontaneous person by nature, and all of a sudden I was having to live by a very rigid schedule because that's what diabetes does. We stayed at the hospital for several days, and when we had learned what we would have to do to take care of Josh, the shots that we would give him and poking his finger every day, we left the hospital to come home. Well, Josh thought because they let us go, he was better. And so when we got home and had brought all the needles and the shots and everything that we would use to keep him alive, he wasn't happy. I'll never forget the first day we got home, and I set him up on the counter to test him before lunch and give him a shot. And as I did that, he said to me, "I hate you. I hate this. You don't do this to anyone else in our family. You only do this to me. Why would you ever think I wanted to do this?" And I'll never forget, as I gave him his shot, he grabbed my cheeks and he pinched just as hard as he could. And I didn't stop him because I felt like I was hurting him. He had every right to hurt me back. And I'll never forget setting him down on the floor that day and him running to his room and slamming the door. And I sat down right in the middle of my tile floor and cried. And I thought to myself, how would we ever get through? That was a really hard year, and things just kept getting worse. If I had to choose one word to describe that year, the word I would choose is darkness. I remember that I couldn't feel happiness. I couldn't remember what it felt like to laugh. And I can remember watching all of my friends as summer came, and their lives were going on just as they had planned. And they were taking trips to Disneyland and all the things that they had talked about they were going to do. And we weren't going anywhere because we were paying off medical bills for something that we didn't even want. And I can tell you, sisters, at that time, I was not content with the life that I had been given. And as that year went on, I'll never forget one day Greg saying to me, "When are you ever going to come back?" And I can remember saying, "I might not," because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to get out of the place where I was. And I can remember on one particularly hard day, going to my wallet and pulling out my health insurance card. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but on the back of your health insurance card, there's a number that says, "If you are in need of mental health assistance, dial this number." And so I dialed the number, and the lady answered the phone, and I started telling her everything that was going on and the trouble and what I was feeling in great detail. And when I was done, she said to me, "Oh, honey, you just need a massage." And I thought to myself, I hung up the phone and I thought to myself, now what am I going to do? Because that was my last resort. That took all my courage to dial the number on the back of the card. And I remember that night putting my kids to bed and waiting until I knew Greg was asleep, because poor Greg, how much more crying could he take? And after the whole house was quiet, I can remember starting to cry. And I cried for probably 2 hours. And I went through a list in my head of every person I know. I thought of my parents and my sisters. I thought about Greg. I can specifically remember thinking about my grandmothers and my aunts, people in my ward, my friends, my bishop, my Relief Society presidency. And I kept thinking, somebody must know how to help me heal. Somebody must know how to help me get out of this place. But at the end of the 2 hours, nothing. No one. And I was so discouraged, and I remember at that moment hearing a voice whisper to my heart, "Heavenly Father knows." And I knew that was true. I knew Heavenly Father knew where I'd been, and I knew He knew where I was going, and that He would be able to help me get where I needed to be to heal. And so I started to pray. And even though Heavenly Father already knew all those things, I started at the very beginning and told Him everything, how it felt and what I was going through. And I remember specifically praying for the rest that is promised in Matthew 11. And at that moment, I can remember the Spirit of the Lord entering my room and lifting me, and I felt strength beyond my own.